poses a significant cyber threat with its efforts to compromise sensitive targets for intelligence collection and to preposition access to U.S. critical infrastructure. In addition to Beijing and Moscow, Tehran has demonstrated an increasing willingness to carry out aggressive cyber operations to the security of U.S. networks and data. Furthermore, Pyongyang's cyber program presents a highly capable and maturing threat, including an approach to launder and cash out cryptocurrency from the United States and other victims to fund its nefarious activities. As cyber becomes a growing battlefield for criminal networks and malign actors, the State Department must be ready to meet the challenge. The U.S. is not facing these real and growing threats alone. Through cooperation with our allies and our partners, the U.S. will continue to work to combat malign cyber activities from the PRC, Iran, North Korea, and Russia. Since the recent establishment of CDP, it's played a role in the U.S. response to a major ransomware campaign in Costa Rica that disrupted critical services. In particular, CDP, alongside other federal partners, worked to strengthen Costa Rica's cyber defenses against attacks from malicious actors threatening the security of both our countries. It has also worked to identify strategic opportunities to leverage partner resources to further U.S. strategic objectives through subsea cable projects in the Pacific Islands. Such efforts ensure that the Pacific Islands rely on trusted, primarily American businesses for their internet connectivity, while also countering the PRC's influence in the strategically important region. On the other hand, the Department of State agreement on a cyber crime UN treaty that conflicted with CDP policy lead and recommendations begs the question of the actual authority wielded by CDP. This hearing should lead us toward conclusions on how to improve CDP efficiency and effectiveness in this vital area of national interest and security. As we move through this reauthorization process, the experience and insights from today's witnesses will help inform this subcommittee on the State Department's cyber diplomacy role in addressing these increasingly important challenges. I look forward to hearing your testimony and recommendations. The chair now recognizes the ranking member, the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Keating, for any statement he may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to our witnesses for being here today. For years, bipartisan members of this committee have recognized the necessity for the State Department to take on the important task of cyber diplomacy. In 2021, the Biden administration announced the creation of the Bureau of Cyberspace and Digital Policy, CDP, with bipartisan support, and the Department of State Authorization Act of 2022 authorized the CDP Bureau into statute, an important step in recognizing the need for a robust and comprehensive approach to cyber diplomacy. With the CDP Bureau established in statute, it's worked in conjunction with this committee to lead the State Department's diplomatic cyberspace and cybersecurity efforts encompassing both hard security and economic policy. As our adversaries, Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea, each take different approaches to undermining U.S. actions in cyberspace, bolstering U.S. cyber capabilities through a strong CDP Bureau is more important than ever. The CDP Bureau has worked to advance U.S. interest in cyberspace across multiple lines of effort. For example, following the 2022 ransomware attack in Costa Rica by a Russian-linked cybercrime group, the CDP Bureau provided swift, decisive support to Costa Ricans and their authorities to bolster the country's digital defenses and resiliency. This emergency support was critical to ensure that a partner in our own hemisphere was able to effectively respond to an unprecedented attack. Similarly, the State Department worked to strengthen Ukraine's cyber defenses in the midst of Russia's full-scale illegal invasion of the country through the Digital Connectivity Cybersecurity Partnership Program, a joint venture by the Department of USAID. These are just a few examples of the CDP Bureau's important work to bolster our allies and partners while promoting American values and security in cyberspace. While I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about an important bureau which has long maintained bipartisan support, it's unfortunately clear that neither this majority nor the Trump administration has any interest or intent to engage constructively on a reauthorization of the State Department. Last week, Secretary Rubio unveiled a proposed reorganization plan for the State Department without any meaningful consultation with Congress. The reorganization would decimate the department's cyber policy tools by splitting it in half. CDP's economic structures would be moved under the economic family of the Bureau, and CDP's hard security offices would be placed in a new Emerging Threats Bureau. This move will create exactly the duplication and the waste this administration says it seeks to avoid. Even more concerning, it deprioritizes a cross-cutting issue that needs to be tackled holistically and at the highest levels. Our witnesses here today and many experts in the field have all pointed out the importance of capacity building in cyberspace and maintaining and recruiting the skills required for a qualified cyber diplomacy workforce. Unfortunately, rather than invest in capacity building in places like Costa Rica and Ukraine, the Trump administration has slashed the U.S. foreign assistance budget and illegally eliminated USAID, a chief implementer of the capacity building programs. At the same time, GAO and Ms. Love-Grayer's, they found out that a nonpartisan report that while CDP is currently staffed and fully operational, it needs to train existing staff and hire more people to meet its growth plans. Rather than seeking to recruit and train staff, the Trump administration has attacked and politicized the federal workforce, leaving a legacy of destruction and indeed distrust. Finally, rather than listen to the advice of experts, consult with industry professionals, and engage with the State Department, this committee has effectively served as a rubber stamp for the administration's destructive actions. Ms. Fixler, you concluded in an article on March 17th that capacity building programs, including those implemented by USAID, are not merely altruistic endeavors, they advance critical U.S. interest. Ms. Love-Grayer, your nonpartisan 2024 GAO report concluded that the State Department provides foreign assistance to strengthen partner capacity and to promote cyber norms to achieve U.S. cyber policy objectives. Ms. Nemeroff, your testimony points out that a well-placed cybersecurity foreign assistance project can make all the difference in leveling the playing field for our companies and private investments in countries that still deeply respect U.S. tech leadership. Yet rather than invite administration witnesses here from the CDP Bureau to testify on the effectiveness of the Bureau's programming or implement the advice of experts like our witnesses here today, the chair of the full committee and many of my majority colleagues have already wholeheartedly endorsed the administration's reorganization plans. This is a troubling abdication of the oversight responsibilities of this committee and an elimination of the Article I authority of this Congress. While I look forward to the testimony of our witnesses here today, I would strongly urge my majority colleagues to listen to what they have to say, work to reauthorize the State Department in a way that serves the interests of the American public, and move this important issue to the forefront. I yield the balance of my time.
Other members of the committee are reminded that opening statements may be submitted for the record. We are pleased to have a distinguished panel of witnesses before us today on this important topic. Ms. Annie Fixler, Director of Center on Cyber and Technology at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Ms. Latesha Love-Grayer, Director of International Affairs and Trade at the U.S. GAO. And Mr. Theodore Nemeroff, Co-founder and Vice President for Data and Compliance at Verific AI. This committee recognizes the importance of the issues before us and is grateful to have you here to speak with us today. Thank you. Your full statements will be made part of the record, and I'll ask each of you to keep your spoken remarks to 5 minutes in order to allow time for member questions. I now recognize Ms. Fixler for your opening statement.
Chairman Self, Ranking Member Keating, and distinguished members of the committee, on behalf of
Would you check your mic or get closer to it, I
closer?
think. Yeah.
Sorry.
Pull it close to you.
Better?
Try it.
Chairman Self, Ranking Member Keating, and distinguished members of the committee, on behalf of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, thank you for inviting me to testify today. For years, on a bipartisan basis, members of this committee pushed the State Department to better organize itself to defend U.S. national security in cyberspace. 2.5 years after creating the Bureau of Cyberspace and Digital Policy, this committee must assess its performance, expand its successes, and address its shortcomings. This hearing is particularly timely given the department's proposed reorganization, which appears to put its cybersecurity efforts at risk and contradict congressional guidance to integrate cybersecurity and digital economy efforts. In my written testimony, I describe the successes the Bureau has been able to achieve because of this integration. I'd like to take this opportunity to summarize the threat we face and the role states' cyber bureau should play. Every day, malicious cyber operators sitting in remote corners of the world attack our critical infrastructure. Across energy, transportation, and communication systems, China has pre-positioned destructive capabilities. Beijing is prepared to use crippling cyber attacks to induce societal panic and interfere with our ability to project power. During the Biden administration, we issued stern warnings but failed to deter Chinese aggression. Trump administration officials and members of Congress have rightfully articulated that our nation needs to go on the offense and punish those who use cyberspace to do us harm. And we need better defense to deny our adversaries their objectives. The Cyber Bureau plays a critical role in both. Over the course of its short tenure, it has demonstrated it understands these priorities and can execute the mission. Congress tasked the Bureau with managing a unique cyber assistance fund because lawmakers recognized it took far too long for us to respond to incidents overseas that might cascade and hit our homeland. Now, in as little as 2 days, the Bureau can airdrop expertise into partner countries. The department bolsters allied law enforcement capabilities to investigate cybercrime and prosecute the offenders, and convinces those same allies and partners to join us when we call out bad behavior. The first step to getting our allies and partners to impose costs on China is for them to agree that a cyber attack has occurred and that Beijing is to blame. The Bureau helps allies and partners proactively build cyber resilience. On this, our strategic priorities are clear. We need the countries that we fight with and through to have resilient infrastructure. Resilience buys America time to deploy a range of policy responses. Had Ukraine succumbed to Russian cyber attacks, Washington could not have provided the lethal aid that has helped Kyiv substantially degrade the military capabilities of a leading US adversary. Last summer, FDD led a tabletop exercise in Taiwan, exploring Chinese cyber-enabled economic warfare against the island. In the game, the thing that gave Beijing the greatest pause was not US countermeasures, but an assessment that Taiwan could withstand the attack. If China believed that Taiwan could survive, it would refrain from attacking in the first place, lest Taiwan's strengths reveal the CCP's limits. Resilience has a deterrent power all its own. But building the resilience of allies and partners will be a Sisyphean task if the telecommunications infrastructure underpinning all of it is built by China. The US military does not have operational security if Beijing is listening on the line. In the CHIPS Act, Congress tasked and funded efforts at state to secure information communications technology. The Cyber Bureau is wisely using its portion on undersea cables in the Indo-Pacific. When Congress created the Bureau, lawmakers rightfully articulated that its head must be the principal cybersecurity policy official in the department. It also needs permanent staff billets so that the funding Congress appropriates is spent wisely and efficiently. There is a battle underway in cyberspace. Without a robust Cyber Bureau, we will not win. Thank you for inviting me to testify today. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Fixler. I now recognize Ms. Love-Grayer for your opening statement. Welcome.
Chairman Self, Ranking Member Keating, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to discuss our work on the Bureau of Cyberspace and Digital Policy, known as CDP. As international trade, communication, and critical infrastructure grow more dependent on cyberspace and digital technology, there's an opportunity to advance U.S. interest in this digital ecosystem, but also an increase in foreign cyber threats. Foreign governments and non-state actors are increasingly using cyberspace as a platform to target critical infrastructure and our citizens, undermine democracies and international institutions, and undercut global competition by stealing ideas when they cannot create them. These are among the reasons that GAO has identified information security as a high-risk issue. In April 2022, State established CDP to lead U.S. government's international efforts to advance our interest in cyberspace, which State defines as cyber diplomacy. Its overarching objectives included building coalitions, strengthening capacity, and reinforcing norms in cyberspace. State uses two main tools to implement this cyber diplomacy mission: diplomatic engagement and leadership in multilateral and bilateral fora, and foreign assistance that provides training and technical assistance to our international partners. Examples of diplomatic efforts include engaging with the European Union to develop shared principles in the 6G wireless network, and supporting the negotiation process of the UN Cybercrime Convention, which if appropriately ratified, would facilitate international cooperation to combat cybercrime. As Congress considers states' reauthorization, my statement today is intended to help inform the discussion about their cyber diplomacy efforts and is based primarily on the reports that we have issued between September 2020 and January 2024 related to those efforts. States' cyber diplomacy efforts have evolved between 2011 and the present. Between 2011 and 2018, State established the Office of the Coordinator of Cyber Issues to lead global diplomatic engagement and developed an international cyberspace policy strategy document, among other efforts. In January 2019, members of Congress introduced the Cyber Diplomacy Act of 2019, which would have established a new office to lead States' international cyberspace efforts and consolidate a range of cross-cutting cyber issues. Later that year, State notified Congress of its intent to establish a bureau that was more narrowly focused on cybersecurity. In September 2020 and January 2021, we assessed State's efforts to establish the Cyber Bureau. We found that it had not involved other federal agencies that contribute to international cyber diplomacy in the development of its plans and recommended that it do so. We also found that State had not demonstrated that it had used data and evidence to develop its proposal for establishing the Bureau, and therefore lacked assurance that its proposal would effectively set priorities and allocate resources to achieve those goals. We recommended that it do so. In response, State consulted other key federal agencies in its planning and collected data and evidence to inform its approach, which resulted in changes to the final plan for the Bureau. Once the Bureau was established, we examined how it was structured to accomplish its goals. CDP contains 4 units, including the Office of the Coordinator for Digital Freedom, International Information and Communications Policy, International Cyberspace Security, and a Strategies Program and Communications Unit. The new Consolidated Bureau and the appointment of a Senate-confirmed ambassador-at-large to lead it elevated cyber issues in States' diplomatic engagements. The ambassador engaged with various other countries' senior leaders on advancing cyber goals. As an example, in August 2023, the ambassador headed the U.S. delegation to the G20 Digital Economy Ministerial Meeting, where he highlighted U.S. views and priorities on digital economy topics. In addition, we reported that CDP's status as a bureau provided senior-level support, resources, and involvement that did not exist before. Although States' efforts to promote cyber diplomacy have evolved, challenges remained. Among them, clearly defining CDP's roles and responsibilities across overlapping issue areas with other intra, and interagencies that conduct work in cyber diplomacy, especially given the breadth of cyber issues, as well as ensuring that the Bureau had sufficient expertise to carry out its goals. These are among the challenges that the Bureau will still need to effectively navigate to lead cyber diplomacy in the future, especially as State considers streamlining its functions and addressing any new priorities of the administration. Chairman Self, Ranking Member Keating, and members of the subcommittee, this concludes my oral statement. I would be happy to take questions at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Love-Grayer. I now recognize Mr. Nemeroff for his opening statement. Welcome.
Chairman Self, Ranking Member Keating, distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My remarks are drawn from my written testimony and offered in my personal capacity. This subcommittee is reviewing the Cyber Diplomacy Act at a critical time. American leadership in key technologies, especially AI, positions us to shape the global technological ecosystem in ways that align with our values and benefit U.S. national and economic security. But our vision is contested, as my colleagues here have really effectively outlined. China poses the greatest and most comprehensive challenge to U.S. leadership, leveraging both economic and security tools to advance its goals. Russia, Iran, and North Korea also pose significant threats, and ransomware actors operating with impunity from Russian territory routinely disrupt our businesses, our hospitals, and our schools. Through the Cyber Diplomacy Act, this committee has helped ensure the State Department is better prepared to meet these challenges. A key strength of Congress's vision was to integrate national security, economic, and human rights equities in CDP. This has increased efficiency and reduced redundancy within the department, and unlocked opportunities to face the challenge posed by China in particular in more comprehensive and strategic ways. But we can always do better. I recommend, going forward, focusing on 4 areas. First, CDP should take further steps to organize itself around a full stack approach to cyber and digital diplomacy. Whether our adversaries gain access to critical systems through hacking or by selling untrusted undersea cables, data centers, or 5G, it all harms our national security, and the department needs to think about this altogether. A full stack approach enables us to see the full picture and leverage engagements at one layer to have influence at others. For example, the way that our cyber support to Costa Rica, which has been cited several times already, has since 2022 opened the door to deeper cooperation with the country on telecom issues. Second, CDP should continue to lead efforts to deter adversaries that behave irresponsibly. Cyber deterrence is not like nuclear deterrence. It requires a dynamic and constant effort, warning adversaries about activities we won't accept, and then swiftly, preferably with allies, responding to activities that cross our lines by imposing meaningful consequences. This effort started in the first Trump administration with coordinated international responses to incidents like Russia's 2017 NotPetya cyber attack, and it continued in the Biden administration with actions like our response to Iran's brazen 2022 cyber attack against Albania, attempting to coerce a NATO ally. Third, CDP should continue to take on a more operational role, especially in incident response, and by using diplomatic channels to support whole-of-government adversary disruption campaigns. These activities fill clear gaps in interagency capabilities that I saw when I was at NSC, working on issues around Ukraine and others. I want to particularly highlight the potential for CDP's recently piloted Falcon capability, which allows state to rapidly deploy private sector incident responders to countries in need. Finally, I want to emphasize the importance of foreign assistance and development finance. We are in a global tech competition with China. We need every tool possible to level the playing field for our companies against China's subsidies and hardball tactics, and a well-placed cyber assistance project or a well-timed loan can make all the difference. CDP needs funding to provide specialized foreign assistance where it's most needed, and it should be empowered to build a coordinated, full-stack investment strategy across the interagency, including with institutions like the Development Finance Corporation. This subcommittee will be reauthorizing the Cyber Diplomacy Act alongside the administration's recently announced plans to reorganize the department. I offer 4 key questions to consider as you decide on the way ahead. First, does the proposed restructuring enable the type of integrated approach I've discussed today? Second, does it maintain the requisite attention, authority, and responsibility of the department's most senior leaders, the ones who can make this a priority in states' regionally oriented work? Third, does it sustain and ideally accelerate efforts to build a technology-savvy workforce? And fourth, does the proposed budget provide the resources required for this critical mission set? I want to thank this subcommittee for its continuing leadership, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Nemeroff. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes of questioning. A series of questions. Ms. Fixler, you said Taiwan survived the attack. What did you mean when you say survived the attack? Is that physical or is that cyber? What are you referring to?
Sure. So in the tabletop exercise we did, it was a series of economic and cyber attacks that were testing the societal resilience of Taiwan to withstand Chinese aggression and withstand efforts to coerce its policy to agree to a reunification with the mainland. So it was a societal and cyber resilience. And if the CCP judged that Taiwan could survive the pressure campaign, it might actually refrain
Might
from
not
the
go
attacks.
kinetic.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to read something to you. Yesterday, probably everyone in this room was aware of the three-nation outage in Europe. I got back from Europe a week ago Saturday. So this is from the Siemens Security Advisory, just to show you how important this issue is. The point of origin for the blackout possibly originated, when they say possibly, they're not definitively saying something, but I believe that they believe this. Possibly originated in a high voltage substation in the Basque region of northern Spain, specifically near Balboa at the substation that they named. The potential method of sabotage was a sophisticated cyber attack targeting the substation's SCADA system, injecting malware that overloaded transformers and triggered a cascading failure across the European grid. The malware exploited a known vulnerability in the Siemens system, and they listed that. So, Ms. Fixler, you, in your testimony, you mentioned the need for partners and allies to be cyber resilient. When I was in Europe, I talked to both politicals in Europe and to our U.S. military. And they made, the U.S. military, from the SACEUR on down, said that we need to be aware that their infrastructure, to include cyber, needs to support our war plans. Can you elaborate on what you said about their vulnerable infrastructure impacts our national security?
Sure. Thank you so much for the question. So we recently at FDD issued a report looking at military mobility, specifically the way that U.S. military forces rely on civilian critical infrastructure to move men and material in the United States. That is true as well overseas, and we intend to look more closely at the infrastructure in our NATO allies and how it must be secure so that our troops have secure transportation infrastructure, telecommunications infrastructure, because all of our forces rely not on infrastructure owned and operated exclusively by the Defense Department, but by civilian-owned infrastructure. So that infrastructure must be resilient to secure our forces overseas.
Thank you. Ms. Love-Grayer, in what ways has the CDP worked with other agencies to advance cyber diplomacy? How does that impact national interest, defense interest? And where is the coordination point, and who holds the big stick, I'll call it, in this area, cyber diplomacy?
Thank you for that question. I actually have several examples, but I want to use one that connects to what you just mentioned. So the DoD has an operation called Hunt Forward, where they assist our partner countries by assessing their vulnerabilities in their cyber systems. CDP partners with them by going in afterwards and actually providing the technical assistance and capacity building needed to address the vulnerabilities that they have identified. And so again, if we're partners with those countries and we're working with them closely, we may even have our own troops in those countries, it's important to not only identify the vulnerabilities, but to help them to address it. In terms of the coordination, there's various ways that CDP coordinates that we found in our audit. There's informal, regular meetings between the heads of corporations and the agencies and with private sector corporations, but also there's formal interagency agreements. So CDP, at the time that we conducted our audit, had 11 different agreements with different agencies such as DoD, Department of Commerce, the FCC, DHS, USAID, and others. And these interagency agreements allowed them to partner with these other agencies who have specific capabilities and skill sets that could be used to provide, again, technical assistance and capacity building to other countries. Who has the big stick? At the moment, it depends on, I would say, depending on what you call the big stick. I think who has the mandate for cyber diplomacy is CDP. Sometimes it's the other agencies who might have the technical expertise or even the funding. CDP does provide foreign assistance funding, but in other cases they may just partner. So CDP has the mandate. And there are a number of other players who have different types of capabilities that they bring to the table.
Very good. I now recognize Ranking Member Keating for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think when we use terms like cyber diplomacy and other terms like that, it really doesn't give effect to the real threat that we have. It sounds something that wouldn't be like a direct kinetic attack or something that we had, but you know, cyber, unlike other kinds of warfare or other kinds of threats, there's no barriers there. There's no wall that can be built. There's no ocean that stands between these threats. They're global, and they have to be approached globally. And as so, we really rely on our allies in this area, even more in some respects than we would through conventional kind of threats that we deal with. So how important is it to have us make sure we are working in these areas, making sure we're funding the cuts to USAID and the other things that could have an effect on our ability to work with our allies? Because if we're working America alone, we'll just not work when it comes to cyber. So how great a threat is that, and what should we be looking for? Mr. Nemeroff.
Thank you. So I think it's a long old saying that cybersecurity is a team sport, both within the interagency and with our allies and partners. And the key thing is to be able to work with allies and partners at different levels of cyber capacity and cyber capability. So in NATO, for example, we work across the board to try to raise the level of cyber hygiene and cyber capability. And then with particular countries, particularly those that are foreign assistance eligible, foreign assistance is a fantastic lever to be able to help them help themselves. And I think that's the key piece of this. Albania is a NATO ally. Albania was targeted by Iran by a major cyber attack that I think really implicated alliance-wide issues. And having foreign assistance as a way to get them to raise their capability was an important way of achieving our policy goals and to make the alliance safer.
And I think readiness is a really clear imperative here, too, because timing is so important. Ms. Fixler, you mentioned how quickly the response has to be, and that's critical to being able to deal with this, and it has to be in place ahead of time. So another question I have, in our own internal, domestic workforce that's there to support this, I'm concerned with a lot of these cuts that are going on and the effects on the workforce and the expertise that could be walking out the door here. How important is it to have a workforce that's already trained, experienced, in place? And what would happen if through reorganization or cuts that was reduced and we lost that? How much of a threat would that create?
I would just say that, thank you for the question. Recruiting and retaining technical talent is a persistent problem in the federal government, across the federal government. And at least part of it is a pipeline problem. We need a lot more STEM graduates. We need a lot more folks focused and pursuing cybersecurity degrees. Not all of them need to be 4-year degrees. Associate's degrees are great. On-the-job training is great. Apprenticeships are great. And so I am particularly heartened by some of the efforts in this Congress to focus on cyber workforce, including things like the Pivot Act, focusing on providing a faster way for community college graduates to get into the federal government with cyber degrees, because we need a lot of cyber professionals in our government to focus on cybersecurity and the intersection between cybersecurity and national security.
And I just add a few thoughts to this. One of the concerns that we had after we conducted our review on CDP is that they did need to recruit a specific type of official. They needed someone who had not just technical capability, but also diplomacy skills. And competing for that, as we spoke with the former ambassador of CDP, he noted it's very hard to compete with the private sector for individuals who can harness both of those skill sets. And so having the staff, once you get them on board, keeping them and helping them to grow and understand the issues is important, but also having staff who can really cover the range. There's a broad spectrum of issues that are involved in cyber diplomacy.
Yeah, with 30 seconds left, too, Mr. Nemeroff mentioned AI, and this is just going to accentuate and geometrically affect our ability to respond in any timely fashion. And one of my concerns is with the reorganization, there could be siloing of different functions. And the whole point of CDP is to bring it all together. And perhaps in any kind of written responses that you might have, since my time is running out, you could really comment in greater detail on the threat of that siloing and how we should be looking at reorganization so that there's not greater difficulty in being able to respond to these really critical threats. I yield back.
I now recognize Mr. Davidson for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Thanks to our witnesses for your testimony and your preparation for this hearing. Ms. Fixler, you argued in a March 17th op-ed that cuts to USAID harm our cyber assistance to allies and partners. I mean, by definition, if we don't give them money, we're harming the assistance. But are they really harmed? And I guess to what extent do we want to preserve it? I think you make the case that this could and should be consolidated under CDP. What's the appropriate amount and kind of cyber assistance that the United States should be distributing?
Sure. Thank you for the question. So I think one of the things that CDP has demonstrated it's good at is using a little bit of U.S. foreign assistance, marrying that with assistance from U.S. partners and allies, and private sector investment. So I'll talk about the undersea cables area, because that, I think, is where that shines. U.S. technology companies, communications companies, are making major investments in undersea cables. They're interested in connecting major population centers because that makes sense from a market perspective. When CDP is able to get involved, it can use a little bit of foreign assistance, find U.S. partners and allies who are interested in the issue, and then combine that with the private sector investment so that we look at it from a strategic perspective. And we don't just focus on the market, but also on where it matters for U.S. military capabilities, particularly in the the Indo-Pacific, but that is applicable in other areas as well.
Yeah, thank you for a very concrete illustration. And as you talk about blending public sector work to try to foster some private sector investment, one of the big things that we're trying to do as a Congress, really as a country, but we need a law that my other subcommittee, as chairman of National Security and Illicit Finance, we're working on outbound investment. So I wonder, Mr. Nemeroff, as you think about AI in particular, one of the most rapidly changing tech sectors, and you think about cyber and other factors, what kinds of things ought we to consider within cybersecurity? I think the real tension comes between one approach that says, well, we don't want American companies investing in AI outside of America, or maybe a more concrete example that uses, kind of the financial services treasury thing and saying, here is specifically who we don't want you investing with. What are the trade-offs there, and what's your view?
Thank you. So there is a hot AI competition happening right now among companies and among countries, and we have to think very strategically about that. Cybersecurity comes into it in a lot of different places, but critically in this area, in protecting the hard-won IP that our companies produce in developing AI models. And so I think it is important to be thoughtful when one is building data centers anywhere, whether it's here in the United States or elsewhere. How do we build in the right cybersecurity systems in order to protect our assets from others who might try to steal them for advantage?
Say nation states that might use their intelligence services to steal American intellectual property.
Absolutely.
Like China.
Like China.
Like China. All right. Yeah, so that's exactly what we're trying to cut off. And of course, they don't say, hey, we're with the Chinese intelligence service. They set up companies and they use it to steal it. And that's why we really want to go with a sanctions-oriented approach, I think, where you go named individuals and named companies that basically you create a burn list and we keep it going. So we'll see where that goes, but hopefully we'll get that done. One of the trade-offs there is always civil liberties. So we find people that say, we're really concerned about freedom of speech. Congress, of course, isn't, according to the First Amendment, supposed to make any laws abridging the freedom of speech. What can our committee do by working with CDP? Because that was the claim that they were just combating misinformation and disinformation when CISA was, frankly, it seemed pretty Orwellian. I mean, a lot of my constituents had a lot of concerns about an American big government agency saying what an American citizen is saying is somehow foreign misinformation. How do we get that right?
Fundamentally, the First Amendment is kind of has to be at the bedrock of everything that we do. We do have a challenge that adversaries seek to use the openness of our system to exploit and disrupt or cause to advance their agenda. That's got to be a part of the consideration. CDP's focus primarily has been on promoting freedom of expression and digital freedom abroad. And on, in particular, safeguarding our networks and other people's networks from cyber threats.
Yeah, I think that's the proper focus. I think CISA definitely got it wrong, and frankly, some of these agencies that were created to defend America were weaponized against American citizens. We want to make sure that we prevent that from happening, and maybe the best way to do that is to hold some of those former officials accountable. Thanks. My time's expired, and I yield back.
I now recognize Representative Amo. Mr. Amo.
Thank you, Chairman Self, and thank you to our witnesses for being here. Look, it's no secret that digital technologies are quickly evolving, bringing with them greater connectivity and new and emerging threats. And these threats are not unique to the United States. They transcend borders and affect our allies across the world. They require close collaboration and global solutions. And starting under the first Trump administration, there was bipartisan consensus that America needed a cross-cutting bureau, reporting directly to senior State Department leadership that could coordinate the various elements of cyberspace, digital technologies, and global digital governance. The Bureau of Cyberspace and Digital Policy, and I know we're all associated with the acronym CDP, now was born in 2022. And its mission, I think, is one to come back to and just, underscore, to ensure an open, secure, and reliable internet, a necessity to promote democratic values like privacy, freedom of expression, and access to information. And CDP made our foreign cyber policy more efficient and streamlined our cyber diplomacy. But Secretary Rubio's new reorganization plan for the State Department breaks CDP. And I think it's important to highlight these changes. Separating its economic functions and moving cybersecurity into the new emerging threats branch. This plan undermines the core reason CDP was created, again, streamlining international cyber policy. It is not efficient to create overlapping and redundant mandates. It is not efficient to jeopardize how CDP coordinates cyber policy with the Department of Defense, Homeland Security, and the intelligence community. And it is not efficient to jeopardize the essential work that CDP does alongside the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA, because we know that CDP manages programs for CISA that provide training and resources to protect targeted countries from cyber attacks. And given that CISA already faces drastic cuts to their programs, thanks to the actions of President Trump and Elon Musk, ending coordination with CDP could cause tremendous harm in keeping Americans safe. And so, Ms. Love-Grayer, how does CDP coordinate with CISA to ensure that we have a comprehensive strategy for cyber diplomacy? And how would the plan on the table from Secretary Rubio that splits up CDP affect their collaboration with agencies like CISA?
In the past, we found that CDP, in particular the ambassador at large who led it, coordinated very closely with CISA, with the Office of the National Cyber Director, to ensure that our domestic policy and our foreign policy, our foreign-facing policy, aligned, so that our views, our perspectives, our policy interests, and our values would be represented in the foreign policy that we had as we faced and engaged with other multilateral organizations. So there was a lot of coordination there. At the same time, the views and the interests and the issues that the ambassador heard out in the world, he would bring back to our leaders here on the domestic side to ensure that we could learn from that as well, that we were using that to inform our own strategies and our own protections at home. So that collaboration we found to be pretty important. In terms of where they sat, it was very important that the ambassador did report directly to the deputy secretary because he had more direct influence and the ability to get leadership support on major decisions. That coordination sat above all of the other bureaus, and so there was a higher level of gravitas that was given to CDP and being able to garner resources and support across the department is what we found. So that breaking that up could look different in the future.
Yeah, and no better time to elevate and make sure the gravitas of that coordination is central while the threats grow by the day. Before I wrap up here, last week, back at home in Rhode Island, I joined Rhode Island College to recognize their designation as a National Security Agency Center of Academic Excellence. And during that time we spent together, we discussed the need for a well-trained and stable cyber security workforce and a pipeline. And one of the things that I certainly would welcome your responses in writing as my time wraps up. We have seen this disdain from the president for public service and federal workers and fire and employees. And so, I want to ask a different version of what the ranking member asked previously, just to assess the firing and how it has of workers and how it's affected our future ability to attract. And I know that might require you to speculate a little bit, but clearly there is an impact, a lasting impact that the termination of employees, for no reason will have on this cybersecurity workforce. It'll make us less safe, and I welcome your thoughts on that in the future. With that, I yield back.
Thank you. Before I introduce our next speaker, the ranking member has asked for a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you're aware, since our last hearing, we had a discussion, and you expressed that you intend to continue a manner of introduction of a member that, at a minimum, is not becoming of this committee. I hope you reconsider, but I want to make clear my objection to the harmful, wrong-minded language of the chairman's introduction. It's the wrong way to treat duly elected members of Congress. It's the wrong way to treat a colleague. It's the wrong way to treat any individual. The chairman knows, suggested to both maintain dignity and respect the committee while continuing our committee's focus on policy issues, that the chairman simply address members by their title if he wants. Representative. But the chairman has said to me that he can't do that because it's just not him. Representative McBride, on the other hand, has publicly indicated that she wants to focus on committee policy at hand. Representative McBride has identified who she is. The chairman has identified who he is. And I think it's something to reflect on each time her introduction is disrespectfully invoked. I yield back.
With that, I find myself in the position, in order to maintain the parliamentary integrity of this hearing, with being the lone majority member here, I would like to recognize Representative McBride.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. Thank you. That means a lot. And thank you, Ranking Member Keating, for your friendship and your support. Thank you so much to our witnesses for joining us today, for your perseverance through a hearing. Cyber diplomacy has never been more important to American national security interests, and it will continue to grow in its significance in the years to come. This is why the administration's proposal to reorganize the Bureau of Cyberspace and Digital Policy deserves serious consideration and scrutiny. And today we should be asking ourselves, does the proposal by the administration make America safer, stronger, and more prosperous? Unfortunately, in just 100 days, the Trump administration has attempted to undertake massive and disruptive changes in how our nation conducts our diplomacy, throwing our entire national diplomatic ecosystem into upheaval. While serious and thoughtful reforms on how the U.S. can best defend our interests abroad should always be welcome, far too many of this administration's actions have been rushed, misinformed, and often downright incoherent. America's diplomatic and soft power is one of our most valuable assets, and Congress's role is to ensure our foreign policy continues to align with our national interests. I've promised I'd work with anyone who's willing to work with me to deliver for Delawareans, so I'm looking forward to learning more about this administration's plans. My first question is for you, Mr. Nemeroff. As emerging technologies transform global digital infrastructure, how can CDP stay ahead of the curve, and what resources or capabilities do you think CDP needs to stay competitive?
Thank you for the question. I'm going to come back to the idea of looking at this from a full stack approach. This isn't a matter of us competing with one technology, but thinking about how we are working to promote a trusted technology ecosystem around the world. Undersea cables, older technology like undersea cables, then data centers, and then 5G networks. That's going to shape a lot of what then gets rolled out in terms of AI in different countries as well. And we have stiff competition from models like DeepSeek that are open source and low cost. And so a key piece, in my view, of what our strategy needs to be is thinking about how are we building that entire stack to enable our technology to get out there. And then how are we using cybersecurity and our remarkable capabilities as a government and a society and our private sector to secure all of those pieces so that we can trust that our information and our ideas can be used safely and without causing harm to our national security.
Thank you. Ms. Love-Grayer, how does the Trump administration's shuttering of U.S. foreign assistance writ large impact the ability of the CDP Bureau to effectively conduct outreach to allies and partners? What impact do you think the cessation of cyber-related foreign assistance has on CDP's ability to carry out its mission?
We haven't yet assessed the effect of these changes, especially since they're not formalized, but I will say we do have a request to look at the congressional request to look at the impact of foreign assistance changes, including to the workforce, and so we plan to do that soon.
Thank you very much. And I want to reiterate the comments of my colleague, Representative Amo, and the ranking member earlier about made earlier about the importance for us to provide a respectful, predictable, sustainable career option for public servants across the federal government. And this is an area that obviously requires specific training, specific skills, which makes it that much more difficult to recruit for and retain in, especially when competing with the private sector. And I think it's important as we have these conversations to recognize the importance of protecting our federal workforce and treating them with respect as we seek to fill these positions and have the best and brightest working in this critical capacity. So thank you very much. And Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. I recognize myself for 5 minutes. We are leading on this CDP reauthorization. I've got several questions. We have, and for everyone's information here, we have a non-governmental witnesses here because we don't have a lot of people confirmed yet. So that's why we have you, and I appreciate y'all filling in the gaps while we can. So a couple of, first of all, for you, Ms. Fixler, undersea cable routing. Because we've seen undersea cables being torn up in several different theaters of the world. Is this an area that we ought to be engaging with our allies? Because is there any way to protect the undersea cables or route them which would help national security?
Sure. Thank you for the question. Undersea cables are a critical issue, and it is both the physical resilience and the cyber resilience of that infrastructure and the ownership and operation of that infrastructure. China and Russia have demonstrated they are interested in disrupting that infrastructure, and China has also demonstrated that it's interested in owning and operating that infrastructure so that it can route and control the flow of communications. So it is concerning when our adversaries are trying to disrupt the infrastructure and when they're trying to control the infrastructure.
Okay, thank you. I just want to get to the specifics here. We're talking about cybersecurity professionals. Give me a range of, first of all, what level do we need in the CDP, and what would be a range of salaries? Who wants to tackle that? Looking at Ms. Love-Grayer, I think.
Well, I think I'll tackle part of this question. We are talking about cybersecurity, but also beyond cybersecurity. There are a range of cyber issues and technical capacities that are needed, and you need diplomacy skills as well. One of the things we heard from CDP after our review is that they had trained about 250 diplomats on cyber issues. So there's some internal training that you can do as well as hiring, and I think we need to use both capabilities.
So what about a salary range? Who wants to tackle that? Because we're competing with a growth industry here.
I can start. The one other piece I would emphasize, I'm a lawyer by training.
Sorry?
I'm sorry, yes. And I think what I learned in legal cyber practice has also been true in diplomatic cyber practice, which is that you take the old skills and you apply it to a new technology. And so that's a lot of what CDP does really well. It brings in diplomatic whizzes who can learn the technology and apply it, and it brings in tech whizzes who can learn the diplomacy and do that too. Salary is a problem. I mean, we operate on the normal GS-15 scale, so there's no special cyber pay at the State Department. And I do think that is an issue, that you have colleagues who can...
No, I'm asking, what are we competing against?
In the private sector,
Right.
hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah. Okay, I do want to get to, because several mentions have been made of the new org chart. I want to just hear briefly, I've got less than 2 minutes here. Let's go down the line. What do you recommend? I think part of it was in your written testimonies, part of it was in your verbal testimonies, but I want to hear specifically, what do you recommend for CDP in the reauthorization? Quickly.
I'll jump in. I think Congress had it right when it, on a bipartisan basis, you created the Cyber Bureau and you understood the importance of the integration between the different components of the cyber mission, the cybersecurity mission, the digital economy mission, the emerging threats mission. All of those work hand in hand. And so seeing that integration remain, I think, is a wise decision Congress previously made. And so I look forward to Congress continuing to weigh in on that.
But now it's directly underneath the Deputy Secretary. It's probably not going to stay under the Deputy Secretary.
Yes, or maybe. I mean, it's you're going to reauthorize it. Thank you for the question, though. I think the integration of the Bureau is where I would focus. Whether that the head of that Bureau needs to have the authority and cross-cutting authorities, but whether exactly where you position the Bureau, I think may be less important than the integration of the different capabilities within the Bureau.
Okay, thank you.
I actually really agree with this point. I think that integration is really critical, even as we interface with other governments who are structured differently. However, I do think that where it sits plays an important role as well, because depending on where it sits, it may have to compete with others for resources, and it also needs the ability to have the leader communicate with the most senior leaders at state in order to make some pretty important decisions. And so I would consider where it's placed. It also says something about what the focus is. If it's in the E Bureau versus the T Bureau, sends a signal about what the focus of the Bureau will be. Or the E family versus the T family, sends a signal.
And I'm out of time, but quickly, Mr. Nemeroff.
I very much agree with the point about maintaining integration. There's no perfect answer. If you're going to try to put it under E or T, I think you need to make sure that whoever it's reporting to cares about the whole mission, and that senior leaders at the top of the department, the deputy secretary, are still going to be representing all the equities at deputies committee meetings and diplomatic engagements.
Thank you. I recognize the ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Fixler mentioned the tabletop exercise that occurred. I'm just curious, as part of that, since I'm also in the Armed Services Committee, we're boosting our undersea autonomous vehicles, and we've been doing it every year because of threats like this. Was any of that considered? I know it's not strictly cyber, but we've been talking about the integrity of undersea cables.
Yeah. Thank you for the question. I'm happy to provide more information about the exercise that we conducted. We have an after-action report. I'm happy to share that with the committee. The exercise looked at a number of different attacks that China could conduct. Some of them were cyber-related. Some of them were sort of more in the economic realm. And they looked also at undersea cables, mostly the disruption and the need to be able to quickly repair that infrastructure.
Well, the other thing is, I remember my time in Homeland Security, how we were trying to deal with cyber threats and the importance of dealing with the private sector, because many of the countries that are represented, as well as our own, that's done on the private side, and it has enormous impact to our safety and economy. And the same is true for other countries that we're trying to make more resilient and make sure we're not affected by things that affect them. So when you're looking at that situation and you're dealing with the private side, can you explain advantages there might be with the fact that we can deal with other countries to deal with their own private sector instances in terms of getting that kind of cooperation, particularly in revealing a cyber attack? You know, just minutes, hours make a difference and the ability to contain that. Perhaps anyone might want to address that.
It was particularly breathtaking, I thought, to see the scale and speed and agility of the private sector in the days after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. They're able to move at a speed I wish governments could move at, and so they're a critical partner wherever you're operating. I found that foreign assistance is a part of it, but another part of it is maintaining a shared situational awareness. And the reporting that you referred to that they often issue is really an early warning often of incidents that we need to respond to quickly, and so they're a critical partner.
Great, thank you. I notice we have another member who's come for a first line of questioning, so I'll yield back.
I now recognize Ms. Kim.
Thank you, Chairman Self. Thank you. I want to thank our witnesses for being here today. Let me go right into questions like how can private sector's technological expertise, such as that from organizations like Verific AI, be leveraged to enhance the resilience of allied infrastructure against state-sponsored cyber attacks?
Thank you. I think it's a critical thing that every country and government needs to recognize that this has to be a public-private partnership, and that governments need to rely and use private sector capabilities to secure their networks. We've made important strides within the U.S. government, for example, moving to cloud as a place to store our data in order to help take cybersecurity out of the hands of individual offices and place it higher up. We've also found that when incidents happen, private sector is often the most agile in investigating and remediating. And so it's very important as we talk to our allies and partners to make sure that they're thinking about this as a team sport as well, working with their own companies or working with capable U.S. Cybersecurity providers in order to provide these kinds of services and support.
I would just add,
Fixler.
yeah, as well. CDP maintains some of those relationships. Its incident response capability, the foreign assistance funding that you all authorized to focus on rapid response and rapid deployment of resources, that is a partnership with private sector companies. It's not deploying U.S. government personnel, but it's a relationship with private sector cybersecurity incident response professionals.
I'd add just one note, which is CDP's foreign assistance also sometimes makes it capable or makes the environment possible for private sector companies to come in. And that we saw that with Costa Rica. Because they changed their environment based on CDP assistance, Intel felt more secure in being able to go in and make a $1.2 billion investment that they probably would not have made if Costa Rica had not changed many of its cyber norms and policies as a result of its interactions and engagement with CDP.
Ms. Fixler, from your perspective, how should the CDP Bureau foster such partnerships to enhance cybersecurity and allied infrastructure, and what challenges must be addressed to ensure effective cooperation across the borders?
Thank you for the question.
Yeah.
I'll focus specifically on the challenge. I think there's a challenge to think about things strategically. When it comes to critical infrastructure, everything is critical, but frankly, there are things that are more critical, and we need to focus on that systemically important infrastructure in our own country and abroad to think about what do we most need to protect against. So if we can think about that strategically, I think that is a challenge, but a real opportunity for us to do better.
Ms. Love-Grayer, can you provide which offices GEO found to have overlapped with CDP, and how the Bureau works to ensure clear delineation between responsibilities with other offices that have cyber equities?
Within state, we found that the Bureau of Democracy and Human Rights and Labor, DRL, as well as INL, which focuses on international law enforcement. Both of those bureaus also have equities in cyber diplomacy. DRL in particular works on freedom, internet freedom issues, and they engage in multilateral fora. They provide foreign assistance. INL works on combating cybercrime, and they also lead a lot of the foreign assistance initiatives with other foreign governments, as well as multilateral diplomacy efforts. So coordination between all three of them are important. We found that they do have regular meetings and conversations, but they were still facing challenges defining who should take the lead on certain initiatives, given the expertise that already exists in these other bureaus.
Talking about that, so can you talk about the steps that CDP can take to mitigate risk of the overlap or redundancy that you're talking about in existing cybersecurity efforts across the federal agencies? And how has CDP improved collaboration with key partners like DHS, DOJ, DOD, and Treasury?
Within the department, one of the things I believe they have started to do, and they can continue to do, is ensure that there is constant communication between all of the bureaus, and they are well aware of which partners they're working with and where the focus ought to be for each one of them. There is still some overlap in the missions, and I think there could be greater delineation between who's taking the lead on certain issues if they're not going to be consolidated in any kind of way. In terms of the interagency, currently they have formal interagency agreements with several agencies, DHS, DOD, FCC, Department of Commerce. Those do seem to be working well because they outline the parameters of those relationships and who's taking the lead.
Thank you. Chairman, are you back?
I thank the witnesses for their testimony and the members for their questions. The members of the subcommittee may have some additional questions for you, and we would ask you to respond to those in writing. Pursuant to committee rules, all members may have 5 days to submit statements, questions, and extraneous materials for the record, subject to the length of limitations. Without objection, the committee stands adjourned. Thank you very much.